Hello everyone. This is a fantastic turnout and they're also punctual. Doesn't happen with corporate events so much, but it's good to see everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Liz Dullymore. I'm the Director of the WA Data Science Innovation Hub, and we are very pleased to have our first Analytics in Action event for this year. And we've partnered with AECOM and Tankstream Labs as well. So I just want to thank Mira in particular from Tankstream Labs for hosting us today. To commence proceedings, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the WADSIH people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I've got a little bit of a spiel on the WA Data Science Innovation Hub, as I like to do. I feel it's my prerogative to stand up here and tell you about what we do. So I've got my colleagues Kate McGilvray and Alicia Fairbank as well here today. So we have been set up, we've been running for coming up to 2.5 years now, and it's a joint initiative between the WA State Government, funded out of the New Industries Fund, and reporting into previously Dave Kelly, and now with the Innovation and Science portfolio split, we're a little bit in the dark, but very, very excited to be working with two new ministers, hopefully under Roger Cook and Don Punch. So our vision really is to enable the application of data science for the benefit of all West Australians, and we are here to accelerate the uptake of data science across all organisations, and that also includes government departments and agencies. And we've had the privilege of working with a number of government departments and agencies whom you will hear from today. So if you are not aware, we have a website that's full of amazing information. We do try to keep the hub very practical, so we publish case studies, how you can get started in data science, what other organisations are doing, so not only government departments, but what's happening out there in industry. We've developed a data science workflow in collaboration with WADSIH around how they deem to generate successful data science projects within their business. So please feel free to have a look at that. That's within our resources section. We have a report on the state of data science within WA and lots of other fantastic information on there. I will now just hand over to Mira to introduce Tankstream Labs and the amazing work that you do. Thanks, Mira.
Hi, so I'm Mira English, and I'm the Community Manager for Tankstream Labs in our Perth office. Those of you who don't know about Tankstream Labs, we're a co-working space for tech startups with a global focus. Our story started back in 2012 when Tim Fung, the founder of Airtasker, which recently this week listed on the AECOM, and he was looking for a space for him and his entrepreneurial mates to be able to collaborate and to work from. It was then that Tankstream Labs was born over in Sydney. Since then, we have expanded to 3 offices across Australia, with our original home at Bridge Street in Sydney, which houses close to 200 members. We also have one in the Sydney Startup Hub with about 400 people, and our location here in Perth in this lovely building. We exist to help support the growth of innovation in the startup ecosystem in Australia, and we're always happy to partner and support industry, which is one of the reasons why we're hosting the WA Data Science Innovation Hub today. On that, I'd just like to quickly lead into some housekeeping. If you haven't on your way in, there are little name badges, so if you could get one of those, please. And then toilets are located on the hallway to your right. There are signs. And then in the unlikely case of an emergency, I will ask you to calmly follow the exit signs down the hallway to the right and down the fire escape. I hope you enjoy your day here today. And if you have any questions about Tankstream Labs and what we do, I'm happy to chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mira. I think we will jump straight into it. Just the format of today, we will leave all the questions to the end, so I'll invite all the speakers up at the end for a Q&A. So if I can ask you to refrain from asking questions right until the very end. So I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker today, Bruce Miller. Bruce is the Assistant Director of Data Science and Analytics at WA Police, and Kate and I have had the privilege of working with Bruce over the last couple of months. Bruce has 15 years of experience in business intelligence across the WA Police Force and WA Treasury. Since 2011, Bruce has worked with the Victorian Government providing assurance on projects over $100 million. He has an undergraduate degree in Economics and Finance with a postgraduate MBA and Masters of Leadership, and is currently studying for a Masters of Data Science at the University of New South Wales. You are a sucker for punishment. One of his hobbies is building a statistical model of the AFL in order to win his tipping competition. If you could just work out how the Dockers could win, that would be great. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Well, great turnout today. Thank you, and good to see everyone here. So, I've been, as mentioned, I've been in police for quite a while, since 2012, and in that time I've got to watch the WA police practice grow from a group of statisticians into a business intelligence function, and now we're going to the next stage of our evolution in terms of data science, which is a fascinating area to me. So we've had a great support from the WA Data Science Innovation Hub, and so when we have a look at the next slide, you'll see the first line there that part of our aims are better outcomes for the community by preventing crime and enforcing the law. So, while we've all watched CSI on TV and they can just do these incredible things, there's some amazing work that goes on in the background to make these things happen. So, some of the things we're working with the WA Data Science Innovation Hub on, for example, is something like persons at risk. So when your granddad who has dementia goes missing, you call the police, and police will try to find them. But quite often, for a lot of people, there's many instances where someone just runs away from home. It's the 13th time they've done it, and so we're trying to develop a decision-making tool to help work out what are the critical ones that we actually have to respond to. So police resources are scarce, we've got a huge job to do, and we've got the entire state to do it for. So we're really busy, so anything we can do to be better at that is very much appreciated. Now, in terms of my role, it's pretty simple at the moment. We're trying to accelerate the speed of data to insight to action. And the action part is really important. I don't have the resources or the people to go chasing pipe dreams. We want stuff that's going to actually make a difference on the ground today. Now, the nature of data science is that we will always have situations where, you know, we try something and it doesn't work, and we put that learning in the bank and move on. But my entire lens is, how do we do it better, how do we do it faster, and how do we make decisions that make a difference on the ground? So some of the things I'm thinking about right now is, how do we reduce the effort to bring in new data? So you can imagine policing is a very data-rich environment. Just in our data warehouse, we have thousands and thousands of data sets. And so, you know, we need to be able to use that efficiently. We also want to be able to query that data. So when you think about it, you know, anyone who's in the business of writing queries, you're doing joins on joins on joins on joins in tables. So how do we do that better? And at the end of the day, we also want to industrialise the data science process. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean is that we will set up a pipeline where we've got projects that are coming in, we're prioritising them, and we can quickly and easily get the data that we need, which is why we're talking about beyond data wrangling, because data wrangling is a huge part of the job. So if you do a Google search and look up data scientists and what is the data scientist's role, some people say it's 50% of the job, some people say it's 70%. No one said it was 90, by the way, but I did see 80%. So think about this. You've got data scientists that, you know, quite often referred to as unicorns because of the skill set, but they're very expensive resources. They're very talented people who have an incredible job to do. Do you really want them doing the drudge work of data science in cleaning up the data? There's always going to be some of that, but how can we minimise that? So think about it this way. If a data scientist is spending 60% of their time doing something that's like wrangling data, that means they're only spending 40% of their time selecting models, training models, and implementing models. So you might have this absolutely fantastic Bayesian belief network, or you might have a multi-layer perceptron model that you want to implement, but you're going to spend 60% of your time or 70% of your time actually just getting data, not doing the bit that your skills are actually relevant for. So a big part of my focus right now is how do we move beyond the data wrangling, remembering there'll always be some. So all these companies have the same thing in common. They all want to know everything about you. They want to know what you like, who you know, where you live, what your interests are, what your hobbies are. And the thing you're going to notice about them is that they're all companies that have billions, if not trillions, of transactions. And they all use graph databases. So I'm going to join the dots on data wrangling and graph databases and why graph databases will help to reduce data wrangling. But someone like Google, for example, if you go back to the year 2000, Google's in a fight to the death with Alta Vista and Yahoo, and someone's going to come out on top. And we all know the answer is Google, they're huge. But what was their competitive advantage? Well, the competitive advantage was a graph algorithm. In fact, if you Google the Google PageRank algorithm, it's actually a graph algorithm. LinkedIn uses graph database. They have billions of transactions. And Pinterest, when it makes recommendations as a recommendation engine, again, they're processing billions and trillions of transactions. Now, when you think about this in terms of data wrangling, that's a huge amount of data to put in and a huge amount to pull out. But when I go onto Pinterest to look up curry recipes, how long does it take for it to come back with recommendations? Seconds. So think about that, billions and trillions of transactions, but you can query it in seconds, right? So that brings us to graph databases. So this particular graph is about a character called Jon Snow from this little heard of program called Game of Thrones. No one's ever heard of that? Yeah, okay. So the thing about graph databases is technically what they do is they store pairwise relationships. It's a new paradigm. You think about relational database systems, they're all designed in third normal form or BCNF, and they're designed to reduce duplication. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more technical just in one slide a little bit later. I'm going to go into that in some detail for those people who are sort of comfortable in that space. But the thing about this is it's the ability to join together data. So if you look at any of these nodes here, they all have a pair. And that's very important for when we're doing our data wrangling. So you think about a typical data scientist gets an Excel spreadsheet quite often and someone says, oh, here's some data I want you to do something with. Or for bigger organisations, you may well get a huge file in a data lake and they say, do something with this. But the idea is that we want to be able to use our data in a way that it's quick to load and quick to query. And the big difference is that relationships are first-class citizens in a graph database. So why does this matter? Well, think about this, right? Even in police, we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of data sets in our data warehouse. Imagine having all of that in a single data set. And that's what you can do with graph databases. So when you think about the time it takes to write code to put things in, every single node only exists once. There's no duplication in that sense. So if you've got all of your data in one data set and you can query across the entirety of that data set, how important is that? It's about speed of query, it's about context of information. So the other thing too is that it's the data set's designed around relationships. So you think about Jon Snow, right? So he's a person who knows other people. Now, that might be relevant in a policing context, who knows who? And lots of events happen somewhere. Again, for policing, we want to know who knows who, how they know each other, where they've interacted. what things they have in common. Like, for example, if I get a number plate, who owns the number plate? Who are their associates? So you might have heard of the phrase of a gang network or a crime network or a drug network. They're all networks. And so we're really interested in what those relationships are. And in terms of criminal intelligence, it's extremely valuable. So going back to our opening slide about what the aims were, we want to be faster to query. So there's some new languages called Cipher and Gremlin. There's others as well. So Cipher is a graph language. It's designed to load data into graphs and query graphs. And it's called ASCII art because the coding is the same as how it looks. So if you're joining two nodes, which might be one person and another person, and there's a relationship, how you code actually looks like what you're going to have your data structure like. So in that sense, the ASCII art graph coding languages are really interesting because, for example, Cipher, it's a SQL-derived language, so it's a declarative language, and it means that we're only going to code 10 to 20% of the amount of lines that you would for a SQL code to load. So if you had 500 lines of SQL code to do some joins and transform some data and extract it and load it, the equivalent code in Cipher is between 50 and 100 lines. So you think about your guys who are writing code sitting there, it's a really big advantage. It's faster to load. And then, for example, a program called Neo4j, which I've actually loaded up at home to test because, I love all the advertising on their website. It sounds really great, but then you go to Stack Overflow and go, well, what's really going on? And then you want to test it yourself, so you load it up on your home PC and away you go. But what's really interesting is that ability to query the entirety of the data holdings with no code visual interfaces. So imagine that you've got thousands of data sets in a traditional SQL data warehouse, being able to query across the entirety of it. So anyone who does any kind of business intelligence or data science, that ability is really, really important. Because if we want to accelerate the speed of data to insight to action, reducing the amount of time we spend loading data and the amount of time we spend querying data is incredibly important. But also important is the ability to get the entire context of the data. So I'm really, really excited about this new technology, and it's something I really hope that we're able to do a fair bit with in WA Police. All right, going to get a little bit technical for a second. So, Excel, data warehouses, data lakes, graph databases. Okay, you'll see there that Excel, denormalised, data warehouses, normalised. So what I mean by normalised, for a data warehouse to be normalised, which is normally third normal form or BCNF, it means that it's designed to reduce duplication. So when we have these databases and we're structuring our data, we want to reduce duplication because that speeds up our queries and helps us to have all our data organised. And they really come from the 1970s. If you get an Excel spreadsheet, you might have a huge amount of duplication. Postcodes are repeated, suburbs are repeated, for example. And with our data warehouse, our schemas are normally already established. If you have a dimensional data warehouse, Kimball methodology, anything like that, your schema is already established. So whatever data you get, you have to try and fit it in. So if you want to bring your data into your data warehouse and then join it to other data and bring it back out, which is your data wrangling part, so you can do your data science, it's a huge job. My guys spend a truckload of time engineering data so we can get a data set to use. Data lakes, so instead of doing your transform and then load, you do your load and then you do transform on the way out. You might have heard of a data swamp. That's a data lake with not a lot of structure or governance, and there's a lot of them around. Everyone goes, got to have a data lake, you're shoveling data in, but then you've got to try and get it out, you're putting your schema on top afterwards. However, graph databases are hyper-normalised. So when we say it's hyper-normalised, it means there's no duplication. So the interesting thing about that is that everything is related to something, and it's designed around the persons, the objects, which could be a vehicle or a firearm, a location, being an address, or an event, which might be a criminal event or a person going missing. So because it's hypernormalised, and the schema is at row level, so what it means is that our data wrangling is hugely reduced because we're not trying to fit it into a structure that's already existing. The data, in whatever structure it's in, as long as we can relate it to something, is able to be very quickly and very easily loaded. So the other thing to remember though is that you can still have all of your traditional database functions. So you can still have indexes, you can still have constraints on unique IDs and things like that. So you've got the advantage, you've got the strengths of the traditional databases and all the advantages of the new databases. So imagine if you could seamlessly integrate new data with the entirety of your existing data holdings. So remember, we're talking about tens of thousands of data sets, all joined together into one data set, and you can do in minutes what might take days with a traditional database. You can query across the entirety of your data holdings. So someone like WA Police, and this is public knowledge, we have probably 170 different computer systems. So if I'm trying to find one number plate in 170 different computer systems, that's a huge job. Imagine if I could just query across the entirety of that and get the answer in minutes instead of days or weeks. And if data wrangling was 10% of the job, I'd still hire the same number of people, but imagine how much more we could do. Data science is incredibly powerful, but if it's not actually making a difference in terms of the decisions you make every day, or in terms of the decisions the organisation's making, and it's not helping to keep the community safe and prevent crime and catch criminals, then why would we do it? So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in the space of graph databases. And look, you know, the actual theory of graph theory was solved back in 1735 by a guy called Leonard Euler. So if you ever heard of Euler's constant, that's the guy, it's the Königsberg problem. And the thing is that the graph databases didn't really start taking off until about the year 2000. In 2010, they've started to explode. Now, in Australia, our national security and intelligence organisations are already using these type of databases, and around the world, national security organisations love them because of that ability to join together data and see the relationships. So I encourage you, if you have any interest in data science, go away, Google graph database and just explore some of that potential that's available there, because it's incredibly powerful. And I think in 10 years, if you're not using graph databases, you're going to be left behind. So thank you to the WA Data Science Innovation Hub for encouraging me to speak today and giving me the opportunity, and I'll be available afterwards to answer any questions, but I believe we've got a forum as well. So if you've got any questions between now and then, think about it, and I'll be ready to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Bruce. I think that was some really good practical examples and things you guys can all look at and take away with you. And I'm sure you're the first person that's mentioned graph databases and Jon Snow in the same sentence, but a good analogy. So we will move right on to our next speaker. There you are, Wing. So I'd like to introduce Wing Shattock. Wing is a senior analyst in the Mobility's Future and Innovation team within the Department of Transport. She's been in the transport sector for over 20 years and is passionate about all things data, and I can definitely attest to that. She's good at keeping us in line here at WADSIH, with Open Data Day and things like that. So we've worked closely with Wing for a couple of years now, so I can attest to her passion for data, which is fantastic to see. She's worked as a GIS analyst and transport modeller and understands the value of good data and the insights to be gained. Wing is a member of various national and state transport data working groups to advise and develop data management principles, policies and governance frameworks. She's a keen advocate for open data and responsible data sharing. So Wing, please join us up here. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Liz and the team for inviting me along today to share with you what we do in the transport portfolio. So today I thought I'd just give you a quick overview, because there is a lot that goes on in our portfolio. So transport insights. Right, Well, as you can see, we are one of 3 agencies within the transport portfolio. I'm the Department of Transport, but we also have Main Roads and also the Public Transport Authority. And that's 3 agencies reporting to one minister, which can be interesting at times. So it is 3 agencies with different data systems, and so there are some challenges for us as we work together in our portfolio. Our aim is to provide integrated transport solutions and services for West Australians. And to that end, we're very customer focused. We aim to provide sustainable transport system, and we certainly prize innovative solutions, which, as my team is named, we are very much keen to be innovative in the way that we look at solving problems within our transport system. Planning and prioritisation is something that we do holistically and across all the modes, and in order to optimise the investment that is spent within our portfolio. And collaboration is key in everything that we do. And so this is the team that I work in. This is Mobility, Futures and Innovation. Our role is to provide greater visibility of any emerging trends and its application to WA. We also do scenario modelling and consider what the impacts are on our systems and our people. We also work as I mentioned, we are quite collaborative, so we do work with lots of other agencies and industry as well. So this is our Perth city today. It might have been taken a little while ago, but it is our city, one that I love, and our role is to think about what would it look like tomorrow. So is this a vision of our transport and city that we live in? So I really like this picture. It shows you, use of drones. You might pick out that there's some AVs, automated vehicles. We certainly want to move towards a much smarter and digitised city. One of the things that we also are keen about is making sure that we have a balance in our transport system. You might see there a guy on a bike, which is great to see, right, Stefan? So there's, we have electric and automated vehicles coming on stream, and that's something that we're preparing for. It's great to have dedicated lanes for the safety of cyclists and pedestrians, and certainly looking at alternative energy sources is something that we are quite conscious of. Now, big data, most of you probably are quite familiar with that term. It does mean different things to different people. But for us, certainly, in general, it's about a big, extensive set of information, data that can be, in which we can derive trends and, in particular, relating to human behaviour and interactions. And this is something I think that has brought, for all data nerds everywhere, it's been a great change in our world. Big data has brought data from the back room to the boardroom. And it is actually with that I was asked by our Director General to look at the data within our transport portfolio, to do an audit of all the transport data, structured data sets, and to look at opportunities where we can leverage the insights that we can gain by integrating data sources and working collaboratively across our 3 agencies. And so this is making a lot of noise. Okay. And so I just thought you a glimpse of the data that we do have in the transport portfolio. We have data from a very operational level with real-time information on public transport patronage, on car and traffic movements. We have information on coastal and maritime tidal movements. So we have a huge expanse of data that we have that we collect and that we analyse. We have data on traffic counts, cycling counts, pedestrian counts, parking information, freight, containers. It's just something that we are in a privileged position to have access to all this information. But keeping in mind that we're also very sensitive to there being personal information within our grasp, and so we are very careful on who we share that with and abiding by the legislation on how we use that information. I just want to show you something that I think Main Roads does a great job of embracing emerging data sources, and they've actually used things like GPS, Bluetooth, sensors in the road, on the road, counters, and even looking at incident reporting through crowdsourcing. And this is something that Main Roads has been great at, matching data together, creating insights, being able to make better decisions on how to manage the transport network system well. They also have an open data portal as well, so if you go to the Main Roads website, you'll be able to access data that's freely available. I also thought I'd show you what public transport data is available as well. This is also on their website. This is all the boardings for the various modes in public transport. So there's modes from bus, ferry, train, and across, and for each of the lines. So that just gives you an idea of how things are changing, how patronage is changing over time. So this is something that is available again to the public. Now, one of the things that was mentioned earlier, I think, was that we have access to lots of data, but the value really is being able to report on it and being able to understand the data that we're using, being able to ensure that it is fit for purpose. And that is through that understanding and the work that our analysts do within our portfolio that you can then identify opportunities to take action on. So one of the things that we are very privileged to have in the transport portfolio are some really talented and skilled analysts in our various areas, various business areas. We have certainly a range of different subject matters, but we do have some collaboration that goes on through our common love of data, which has been fun. So as I mentioned earlier, the big data has made its way from the back room to the boardroom, and it was, I think for this reason, that I was asked by the DG to create an audit, and so with that I was able to compile all the information, and the Transport Data Register now gives access, which is now accessible by all our staff in the 3 agencies, can now in a single location search and make contact with the subject matter experts in using that data and being able to use it properly. So another triangle I want to show you, a lot of triangles today. This one I thought was helpful to understand that we do have a lot of business intelligence in our various business units, and they do their day-to-day job well. They report on what needs reporting on. But it's actually when we get to the next stage of that triangle, as we move further up, is where those analytical capabilities really can make a difference and affect the decision making that's further up the tree. So we have, let's have a look. So we have within our portfolio some really talented people that do analysis, but we also have 2 modelling teams within our transport portfolio to do scenario modelling, to do predictive modelling of what the future trends might be, and also to assess the impacts of emerging trends. And the advisory services is something that our Corpex is keen to leverage. And so just recently, my colleague and I were working on this dashboard that creates strategic metrics that would actually assist our corporate executive on having a better understanding of how things are changing throughout our system across all the modes. Having that integrated understanding has been really helpful. The dashboard integrates historical and near real-time data, and it shows the current and emerging trends that are happening, especially as we are moving towards a world where more and more things are digitised. People are changing their behaviours due to pandemics. It certainly has been great to have that at our fingertips to be able to use that as our evidence base. A case study I thought I'd mention is that it's the Public Transport Optimisation Program. Now this was a collaboration between DOT and PTA as well as Treasury. The reason this was initiated was because we were finding that the public transport boardings were dropping even though the service kilometres were increasing. So as you can see over time, there is what we call the yawn, and that was something that had to be addressed, given that we continue to invest in public transport and yet we were seeing a decline in patronage. So the team was brought together to analyse and better understand why this was happening, what the drivers were for this, and to provide advice to government. Because it's important that we are investing well, and that's certainly something Treasury is very, is very keen about. So options were modelled, and options were provided to the Minister, and also looking at different subsidy arrangements as well. The other thing I thought, and this was a chart, a graph that was provided or done as part of that study, and it just shows you how over time each of the activity centres within our Perth public transport spine, how it's affected, and how much usage is used of each station. And pretty much we found that most of those activity centres were increasing in public transport usage between 2011 and 2016, despite that general decline across the network with the other modes, public transport modes. Mobility as a service is something that it's a vision for the future. We are keen certainly to move towards this space, given that we have a lot of digital information now. We have a lot of big data. Whenever you use your phone, whenever you use your fridge even, you're generating big data. But certainly the way that we're seeing transport transform is the way that we can bring all of these transport offerings into one single platform. And so by doing that, you can book and you can pay for a journey in one single payment. And that's the idea, that's the concept that we're working towards. It's, I think, a great vision to have, although there are challenges. But thankfully it is a national agenda, and so there has been a national committee set up to look at how we can focus on areas such as, what's the role of government in this, what's the role for industry, how do we have good legislation in place to ensure that this works for the fairness of all, how do we ensure, decide on what business models to use. Data sharing, there'll be lots of data that's generated from each of the consumers and the various organisers, and so it's quite a challenging future, but I think one that will have great benefits. So it is in that data sharing space that I've been involved in looking at data standards and some of the governance structures that we would use in preparing ourselves for that sort of future. So the mobility revolution, as we see it, is going to be autonomous, it's going to be connected, it's going to be electrified, and it's going to be about shared mobility. So as you can, we don't have a time frame as such on that because things continually change, and I think the customer readiness for that sort of future is what's going to determine how quickly these things, become mainstream. So one of the important things, though, is that we continue to engage with the community and work collaboratively with industry to move towards this type of future. It's something that we value highly, being able to seek engagement, do consultations with the public, and working collaboratively across the different sectors, and whether it's public or private, we do have that sort of focus. And so I just thought I'd finish on that, since you guys are going to be part of that at some point, part of that consultation. With the census coming out in August, that's a great time for us to collect, sentiment from the community and to understand what are your needs and how you currently travel. So that sort of information becomes really valuable to us as we plan for the future and how we ensure that we meet the needs of the people. So thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Wing. I think the opportunities in building and predictive analytics solutions across transport are huge, and I'll just reiterate that they do. Transport does have an open data portal with data freely available. So if anyone wants to tinker, then feel free to access that data. So I will move right along to our next speaker, Michael Carroll. Michael is in charge of data governance at the Department of Communities. His experience over the last decade has been in managing intelligence analysis and strategic policy teams with a strong focus on using data to support these functions. Michael's current role involves developing the capability of the organisation to create insights, understanding the place aspect of our work, and promoting the sharing of data assets to improve services. And he's been very kind to let Kate go from the Department of Communities and join us here at WADSIH. So Michael, please come up. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Liz. Just for my own curiosity here, so I can understand the audience, who here is from the not-for-profit sector? Anybody? Oh, one. How about other government agencies? And private sector? Okay, so that's a good mix. Good, because it's the private sector people that I want to talk to today. Actually, no, I want to talk to everyone. So I gave a presentation recently inside the agency, and I don't know if you know, Department of Communities has moved down to Fremantle, which for me is a bit of a trek, but I've really gotten into podcasts as a result. And there's a new one between Bruce Springsteen and Barack Obama. And Bruce Springsteen actually said something really amazing the other day, and I had to rewind and then get it to auto-type into my thing while I was driving so that I could record it for my presentation that morning. But it was really expressing the feeling that all of us are part of what is happening around us. So we are part of the flow of history, and we should acknowledge what is happening around us and do our part to make it better. And when we think about our role in analytics and our role in data, we actually have quite a crucial role in being able to observe what is going on and interpret that and make the insights from that process useful for our leaders. And in Department of Communities, we deal with data about people, and it's often very critical information about individuals, but it's also about assets. So as government, we're custodians of very significant data assets. And while we have a lot of people who can do their work, we often lack the capacity to fully exploit the data asset, the data resource, and to mine that to the extent that we should be able to. So developing that capacity within government really benefits everybody. It benefits the agency themselves, it benefits the people who the data represents, and we should be able to have outcomes of improved services to the community through better utilisation of those data resources. But how is it that as a government agency we can actually make best use of those data assets for the community? My own observation on this was that there are significant risks from those capacity gaps, and our change processes often focus on our service front end, or solving the big problem, or addressing the poor white elephant in the room who's stolen all the money. And we're dealing with the forensics of finding out what else has gone on with that, which analytics would have solved. We would have picked him up a lot earlier had we had better forensic analysis of our financial systems. But the range of tools that are now available to us for this purpose has expanded dramatically. And so for our own agency journey of maturation in analytics, it's acknowledging, first of all, that we're not there yet. In fact, we're a long way from it. But also the data that we hold represents individual people. And so the avatar of what we record in our system should respect those people as individuals by being as faithful a representation as possible in our data systems and in the way we use that information. And the recent election is going to have significant ramifications for the way that we share information in WA, because one of the bills that's been on the back burner for government is the Privacy and Responsible Information Sharing legislation. And that's a piece of work that's been pushed for a number of years, but it's not sexy legislation. It's not something that's going to get big bells and whistles in the newspapers, but it is something that is important. It is an underlying framework that will support the sharing of information, not just within government, but outside government. And there's a stronger chance that'll get passed because it's at the bottom end of the priority list for legislation. And with control in the upper house, I suspect a lot of that administrative stuff will get moved through where it might have previously. So that'll be an interesting space to watch. So back in 2012, we started a program in the Disability Services Commission, which was the agency that I was in when we morphed to become Department of Communities. And what we were looking at there is individualised packages, which is where we say this person has a disability, this is their support network, this is the funding they need to allow them to participate in society. This is the funding that is needed to support them. This is the principle that underlies the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And so when that NDIS was being rolled out nationally, WA decided to go its own way. We had our package-based system, so we didn't engage directly into the NDIS, we ran our own. And that included a requirement for us to employ an actuarial company to help us run the insurance scheme. So at the time, there was my team. It was a very small business intelligence team of 4 people. We had I would say, very limited capability in doing any kind of advanced analytics, but I was also the contract manager for the actuarial firm. So as contract manager, I wanted to make sure that there was knowledge transfer in that process from the actuaries to our team in their methodology, but also in the approaches that they were going to apply that we could observe. And that paid real dividends to us, because from the commencement over that 4-year period that we worked with the actuaries, we were able to observe not just the actuarial approach, but the way they did analytics and the tools they used for analysis, the way they recorded counting rules, all of the processes and structures that make that business very efficient, that we were able to absorb and apply in our own. And I guess that's my main message for today, is that if you're coming to government to sell us a service, expect us to ask for knowledge transfer now, because we want to learn more, and then we can ask for better products from the sector. 2020 was an amazing year. I don't know if anyone else saw this tweet when it went out in March, but we had a massive acceleration in what we were enabled to do by our organisation and by government generally as a result of COVID-19. Department of Communities was very, very fortunate because we were moving to Fremantle, and because of the working environment down there, which is essentially a hot desking environment. All of our staff had been issued, or were about to be issued, laptops and mobile phones. So we had the stockpile that meant everyone else couldn't get Dell laptops for a while, but we were able to switch on almost immediately to home-based working. Unfortunately for me, I went straight into the incident management team and didn't get a single day at home with my dog, but apparently it was fun for everybody else. So, welcome to 2021. Oh, good. I was worried that the logos on the back there would... So everybody's desktop looks like the back end there, I'm sure now, with all the communication apps that we're using to work collaboratively from home. But if ever there was a time in 2021 to take advantage of the esteem in which data analytics is now held, now is that time. And our ability to undertake analysis of really quite complex data sets that decision makers need is being supported strongly by the decision makers themselves. Often they don't understand the methodology, but they understand that they have a need. And so the message we're consistently getting is, if you give us a pathway, we will follow that pathway. And it's really strengthened our arguments when developing business cases. And I think everyone's absorbed a lot more of the technology that only geeks ever really used, like QR codes. 2 years ago, there were very few people who even knew what a QR code was. Now in Western Australia, everyone is using them every day. So our ability to sort of collect information through, or provide information to people through QR codes is been quite a dramatic change. So our message is that we're going to be seeking engagement with other government agencies, and we're opening up on data sharing in a way that we never have before. Bruce, we should have a conversation about that. I understand you want some data sets. There are always barriers relating to privacy and the sensitive nature of our information, but for a lot of the information that government holds, aggregation of that information to a sufficient level removes those barriers, and it's just been the practice of government to not share as openly as we could. So we're seeking collaboration not just through the provision of the services we purchase, but in helping our agency grow its own capability so that we're able to continuously improve the way we work within the organisation itself and within government. Some of you might be aware of the Data Hub project that's being run through the Department of the Premier and Cabinet and the Office of the Chief Data Officer that they're going to have up there for the whole of government eventually. That'll mean support from central agencies beyond what is currently provided just through Treasury to share data more widely. So I guess, I think, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. My team is now moving into the next phase where we're starting up a program of skills development, and we're expanding that beyond our team to other areas in the agency, and that's sometimes very simple. It's Python courses for people who've not used Python before. It's understanding some of the modular systems from Microsoft like Power Apps, and getting people to start automating the small tasks that is taking their time. And as I think both Bruce and Wing were describing, the efficiencies that can be gained by adopting more automated processes. And that's something that in government we have a process that we cling to because it's my job to do this process and it's a production line and it works. But I can add more value because I'm also the person with the knowledge about that data, and I could be adding insights to that rather than just engaging in that process. So that's the way we're trying to encourage people to shift their thinking towards, is really moving into the value-adding component of the analytics work. Digital transformation from our IT goes back to that COVID-19 driver. The fact that so many people are now more familiar with communication systems than they were a year ago is a great benefit to a lot of the work that we're doing. Data is not just the numbers, it's the people that we work for and the people that we represent, and that's something at Department of Communities that we like to consistently hold in mind. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael, and it's it's so great to see that you're providing people the opportunities to grow their capabilities. I think often within the hub we see a lot of that resistance and inertia just through a lack of understanding and knowledge. So once people are have those capabilities, then things can happen. So I would like to invite the speakers up to, I was going to say stage, but it's not really, up the front. Thank you. And we do have a couple of roving... Oh, no, these are the mics.
I'll run one out too.
Okay,
Do you
perfect.
want to use that one?
Yeah, I can use this one up here.
Did you see the socially distanced?
Socially distance. There you go, Bruce. Yeah, I said turn that one off. I'll shout. So I will open it up. Are there any questions from the floor to start with? Yeah, I think you've got a mic coming.
We may need to work on shouting.
Hello. Hi everyone. Great presentations, everyone. My question is for Bruce. Stand up so you can see me. Very interested to know a little bit more about the design of these graph databases. I guess one thing that you said got stuck in my mind about the 107 computer systems that you guys have and running license plates, things like that. So how does it work when you want to have that information in a separate environment, a graph database? Is that data being copied across? Is that virtualization? If you can tell me a little bit about the design, it would be fantastic. And also, any particular vendors or products that you would recommend from a graph database point of view? Thanks.
Okay, so any business intelligence or data science practice where you have a lot of data sets, you're going to have some kind of staging area. So whether it's a RDBMS that's relational or whether it's a graph database, you're going to have some kind of staging area, whether it's a data lake or some kind of environment, and then you'll bring that through. So if you've got, like police do, hundreds of corporate systems, what we do now is we work through the business process. We understand the business process in a very traditional Kimball business intelligence methodology, and we build our data sets around those principles, and we have them available to us in the data warehouse. What I imagine will happen with the graph databases is that we'll actually run both of them in parallel. So there are some circumstances where a traditional SQL database with a SSAS and SSIS stack is exactly what we need. And in terms of transparency for auditing purposes, that's a good thing. But with a graph database, that's where data science will come alive for us, I think. So if we're able to stage that data in and bring it into the graph database, what it means is things like pattern recognition. Okay, so imagine a scenario. I'll say Bayswater because that's where I live. I'm not picking on any suburb in particular, but imagine there's a run on burglaries. Someone's recently released from prison and they're going around during the day knocking off houses. And people are coming home and going, God, I've been burgled. What we want to do is we want to build the data science pattern recognitions in where it's going to register that, and then it's going to analyse the pattern of where it's happened and the modus operandi. So did they break a window? Did they break in through the roof? And it's also going to understand who's been active in the area recently, and we will have a recommendation engine to help assist the police with their lines of inquiry. So in terms of how the actual database works, in the sense of getting the data in, you write code, you bring it in, and you write code, get it out. But you do have the option of no-code interfaces to query the whole of the data. Now, I can't recommend a particular platform. The one I've installed at home is called Neo4j, which stands for Network Optimization for Java. That's probably the most mature one out in the market at the second, but if you go to Azure, you can fire up a Cosmos database. If you go to Amazon Web Services, they have an equivalent. There's also Pixie, there's also Tiger. So there's a few out there. The great thing about Neo4j that I like is that it is the community version, which is open source, is free. And the only thing it doesn't have is the controls for access, and it doesn't have the logging, which is always critical if you have any problems. But for a small scale, yeah, here we go.
Right. How many people are using graph databases at the moment? Anyone in hands?
Yeah, good.
1, 2. Well, Woodside. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? Yep.
My name is Wilson from the Zag. Thank you, Liz, and for the speakers. Pretty good. My question is a question of capability. So, I work in professional services. My job is actually to provide capabilities to augment. So, you guys mentioned different technologies and capabilities, mobility, the graph database, and you talk about unlocking the value of Power Apps, Power BI, etc. So, the drama that I have these days that people are not available is workforce. The workforce to work in this area. So the question is not for anyone in particular, maybe for all, is how are you trying to resolve that problem of building your teams or finding the capabilities?
We might throw that one to Michael, as you touched on that.
We were commenting before the session that if you work in data in WA, you very quickly meet most of the other people at one event or another, like today, of the other people, and if you mention names, people recognise them. So, in the sense of it's quite a small pool of people who have an interest and an active participation in analytics, absolutely. I think we're very fortunate to have two major educational institutions in WA who have really decided that data science is something that should be supported. And from a government perspective, we're trying to grow our existing people who've worked in statistics to get more into rich analysis, forecasting, and skill them up in more data science disciplines. But we do have a shortfall in WA, and we are competing with the rest of the world, and within Australia, only Australia at the moment, because we can't really get anywhere from overseas, for a pretty shallow market of available talent. So for us, I think we're really strongly looking at what we can develop internally from people that we already have, but also provide opportunities for graduates, even internships. So I know a couple of people who are first year data science at UWA who absolutely incredible, and I've seen them do fun projects for their parents. One of them whose parents is a historian who basically demonstrated that the work his father has spent the last 30 years on can be done through good data science in a matter of weeks. Which made his father despair and delight all in the same breath. But I think that, you know, we need to really grow our assets, particularly in the young community in WA. And we're even looking at programs that recognise data sovereignty of Aboriginal communities over their own data, and use that as an opportunity to have them start to work with their own data and explore whether or not any of the people in those communities might be interested in some more data science opportunities. We have had a few young people come through who it's really making me joyful that we have some opportunities amongst the younger community in WA. But I think for me that's the focus, is we're going to have to home grow this talent, because it might be a while before we can bring it in.
If I can just make a plug for what we do. So that is a massive, obviously, focus of what we do. And what we see in the hub is that, you know, my 8-year-old can code better than some of the high school students. So some of this stuff is getting taught in primary school, and there's a bit of a gap at the moment. But what I'd also say is back to Bruce's point around the data wrangling. So, you know, we're using people that have PhDs in machine learning to do data wrangling. So how can we engage, we just had a meeting with North Metro TAFE, how can we engage the vet sector to, you know, to look at some of those skills that are required in the earlier stages of, you know, what makes up a successful data science project. So we're very focused on that. And if you're an SME, we run free Python coding boot camps as well. So we're there, but there is a shortfall. But I think if we can all sort of work to build that capability together, it will
and
come.
if I can add, there's also lots of free courses now online.
Yeah.
Thanks to the pandemic. So if anyone wants to upskill or change direction in their profession, there's lots of opportunities there. You mentioned, Michael, there's a couple of universities who offer training now, and there's certainly lots of postgraduate courses you can do in predictive analytics and other things like that.
Yeah.
And just to add one last comment, in WA Police, we've split our practice into a long time ago, where we have a data engineering function and we have a business intelligence / data scientist practice, because the guys who are doing the data science, I don't want them spending their time doing data wrangling, because there's a whole career around that. So the two of them can't succeed without each other, but they have their specific skills.
Yeah, indeed. No, you can hold on to that. There was a question at the back there.
Hi, Doug Hall from Pastoralists and Graziers. So I'm from industry and I'm representing people like pastoralists and farmers. So I sit on two committees, one police, one main roads, one to do with firearms and one to do with livestock. And they're both instances where the sort of data that you're collecting and analysing is tremendously powerful. But on the other hand, my members are increasingly under pressure, or feel under pressure, by other departments who aren't here today, maybe in the audience, who increasingly want to know more about what they undertake within their businesses. So my question is really getting more into the philosophy that underpins this whole venture. So acknowledging there are benefits, but there are also dangers. And joined up databases, I understand the efficiencies that result from that, but I'm also aware that the Auditor General each year does an appraisal of security system on organisations' data systems, and it's usually pretty abysmal. So I would have thought one of the advantages of a dispersed data-based system is that it's actually harder to access all of the data, but once it's joined up, that surely heightens the level or the need for superior and very effective security systems to be absolutely paramount. So that's one question. The other one is joined up systems, great, but there's another way. There's another philosophy to things, which is about dispersed knowledge. And so where you capacity build society So that could be not-for-profits, could be businesses, could be organisations like mine, to actually have the skills, the computer systems and so forth. So rather than having it all joined up, and my members are concerned about big government, so who needs to know effectively? So do governments need to know everything, or do they need to know that people in society are taking more responsibility for their affairs in terms of data collection, managing their businesses or their operations better, using that data because they're using modern analytical tools, which goes to the core of capacity building. So that's two questions, one about security systems and the other one about who needs to know joined up systems versus dispersed systems. Thank you.
We might start with the single database and I guess the security aspects of that. Do you want to touch on that?
Okay. So right now, in terms of security, our priority is sovereign nation attacks. So I'm not worried about the bloke down the road from me somehow cracking it, or a 14-year-old. The Chief Information Security Officer has a really big job in police, and the security, all I'll say is that I'm confident that it's fit for purpose, but in life there's no guarantees. In terms of dispersal of data, there's some really good initiatives around, for example, transport, making data available. There's the open data portal where a lot of government data is put, which is available to people. And there's also, for example, the social investment data resource. So Curtin University, in conjunction with the government, holds a whole lot of de-identified data, but it's transaction level. So they can actually join together the data, but without knowing who it is. So if people are looking to do research, it contains everything from mental health data, police data, education data. There's a wealth of data there, but you don't know who the individual is. So there's research opportunities there through the social investment data resource. And that's actually being run by the Department of Communities with Curtin. So there are some opportunities there. Does that kind of go some way towards?
I should probably clarify, but what I mean by dispersed is actually discrete, separate, private, so this property right ownership of the databases, which then permits or encourages trading of that data. So it's the opposite almost to the open laissez-faire approach that you've described. So people actually collect data within their domains. They don't make it freely available, but they are prepared to trade it.
All right, so that sounds like we're getting towards the European general data protections for individuals. So where people have sovereignty over their data and they can choose to have it deleted, or they can choose to allow companies to persist with it. But the controls are a lot different in Europe in that regard. Look, to be honest, I can't answer your question. I don't know the answer. So in terms of a policy level, I would love to give the government some advice, but that's not my role right now.
I might pass over to Wing and Michael.
So I would suggest if it's available publicly, which I think at least a draft of the bill is, the Privacy and Responsible Information Sharing Bill, as it stands, is probably worth a read in that regard, in that I know that they reference the European standards as part of that work. I don't know whether that means adoption of those or to what extent they're adopted, but I was in the room for some of the discussions where we specifically talked about that. In theoretical terms, I like the idea of everybody having a knowledge bank that is shareable and tradable. The mechanism for that is a challenge, I suspect. But I think that data sovereignty is definitely something that you're going to see discussed more often in Australia, and particularly given the imbalance that exists now between the citizen and the large corporation. And it is the large corporations, not government, who can conduct in-depth analysis, because as someone who's tried to do analysis of government data, it's a real challenge.
I think it's also worth noting that the Information Commissioner is looking at the complexity of who actually owns data as it comes into government, and how you flow that back to the individual. But it's not an easy thing, and then you come to ethical use of that data beyond that as well. We've probably got, how are we going for time? We're almost up. Is there one last question from the audience? Yeah.
Happy to just shout if you want.
She's coming.
Kath Jordan from WA Country Health. I guess for all three of you, what I'm interested in is to understand from your departments and your areas the ratio of, I guess, your standard business intelligence, stuff for automation and the basic reports going out, to how far you've actually moved into the predictive analytics capabilities as a government area.
Wing, do you want to? Yeah.
So we have, I mentioned earlier, 2 transport modelling teams. They've certainly been in existence for quite some time. So we have that capability in-house where we can do modelling, forecasting, different scenario modelling. They're also, regular, on an ongoing basis, updating information with any emerging data sources that come up. So that's, I think, we're in a really good position to have.
So on that note, unless there's any other burning questions, but our speakers, you'll stay around for a bit of networking. I would just like to thank you all again for giving up your time. I know how busy you all are. This event sold out so quickly, so there's a huge amount of interest in the use of data in government, and we definitely see that at WADSIH as well. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for coming. Please do stay around. We've got some drinks and some food and plenty of opportunity to network. If you want to engage with the hub, there's some various socials up there, so please do, and look out for our next event. Thank you all for coming.